There is this rule of thumb about how many workplaces does a person need to know, and also how many people do you want to train for every workplace. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And this video, it's about training, but also more about training effectiveness, efficiency. How much should I train? How many trained people do I need? And there is this rule of thumb, and it's the 1 to 3 and 3 to 1 rule. And it gives you a good starting point. Now, if you have a factory where you have basically the same workplace, so one workplace is filled by 5 people at the same time, you of course need at least 5 trained people on that workplace, right? Otherwise you cannot even staff one shift. But this is more when you have sort of unique workplaces. But it can still mean you have 5 or 50 or 500 people in your factory, but each of them, so each workplace sort of demands one person. And in that case, what we generally recommend is that one person knows 3 workplaces, so that you keep him a bit flexible, and you have at least 3 people trained for each of your workplaces, and that is to keep your security in running the operation. If we draw it out a bit and then we can see what it means, and afterwards we'll go into the rationale, the efficiency of this, and when you can do a bit less or when you need a bit more. So one person should be able to work 3 different workplaces, and that does not mean at the same time. And here also I think it would be good to state what is a workplace. As a very general rule, one workplace is where you plan someone for an entire shift. So if you just work in one big shift, maybe the terminology is not directly clear, but when you plan someone for the day, do they work always in your assembly area line A? Is this, well, not per se that person always, but do you always plan someone on assembly area line A? Then assembly line A is a workplace. Is your factory more, well, someone who is in assembly, they will have a bit of work on line A, then B, then D, then G. So basically anyone in assembly needs to be able to operate A to G at all times. We don't really use someone who can only operate assembly line B because they don't even have a normal 8-hour day. They will, or 12-hour depending on where you're from, but they don't fill their working day with just one line. We plan them in assembly. So in that case, one workplace is assembly. Now, what we also have with 3 people being able to work your places, and this is again based on if you have unique workplaces, right? So I can imagine that in my previous example, if you have all the assembly lines being one workplace, probably during one day, one shift, whatever, you have multiple people working there. Then of course you need at least so many people to be trained. But now let's say that your ingredient reception, a logistic control and warehouse entering job in a relatively small factory, it's a typical 1-person job. So you have this work center, this job, someone will be put on goods reception the function, so goods reception task for the day. That is 1 person. So for this 1 person, it's one of the jobs that they know. But today, when we plan person 1, the other 2 will not work in goods reception. But we do still want other people to be trained there. Because of course, at some point, they will have vacation. I mean, they won't be around the whole year every day. So you need to take into account that this person will have vacation, and then you can plan somebody else. Now, why do you want 3 people? That is, next to vacation, you have suddenly needing to shift. This can be due to accidents, incidents, illness. So you can imagine if 1 person is on vacation, the second falls ill, you still want a 3rd person. It can also be because this one, or any of them in fact, have a different specialty, and in one of those different specialties, somebody is on vacation, so they need to leave, and this one is vacation or sick, or you want to shift it around a bit, they leave. So that's why you want this third one. So 2, I would say, is always the bare minimum that you want to have trained on every function, every workplace that you have in your company. And yes, that should actually include all of your staff functions as well. So you sort of do need a replacement general director and a replacement safety officer. Now, some of these functions can quite easily be fulfilled for at least a day or so, or even, as the cynics would say, it doesn't really matter if you're maybe quality assurance officer or especially your general manager is out of the company for a couple of days because they fell ill, but during a holiday tasks need to be picked up. So and also when they leave the company, right? I mean, at all levels, at some point you run the risk of people moving on, of people retiring. So 2, absolute minimum. Most people immediately grasp that idea, but the third is there to always have this backup, but also to get you flexibility. Now, and on that flexibility, that's also where the rule of thumb comes from, that every person should be able to do 3 positions. Because this way, when there is some changing demand in your production, in your whole operation, this goes the same for any service organization. And in fact, I think for service organizations, it might be even more pressing. You can move this person to other jobs that do demand the labor pool today. And with this, make sure that you can optimize also the efficient use of your human resources. Now, I already said a bit that there is, of course, a good reason to have more or fewer people on a place, or more or fewer workplaces for one person. One of them is this: okay, you could get by with only 2, and if at this moment in your company you basically have the one person, one workplace, and one workplace, one person practice, sort of practical rule, first go to a 1-on-2 and a 2-on-1 system, and make sure you spread that over your organization first, because that will give you more flexibility than have a few people who are broader skilled, which, by the way, you also see quite a bit in the more artisanal types of manufacturing, where you have a number of workers that can really do one job quite well, and then there is 1 or 2 all-rounders who can do everything and who just jump in everywhere where it's needed. But this is it's a system that will grow out of itself when you move towards a more standardized production and when you are expanding your company a bit. So it can work very well as long as you are still in this artisanal stage, when you also have maybe up to 10, 20 employees in this factory, in this manufacturing. But when you get over that, you really want to get more flexibility. Now, when do we go a lot higher than 3? That is especially when you have a workplace, and we talked a bit about this example I just thought up with the assembly with a number of lines. When you have a workplace where basically a job, so one workplace, consists of multiple tasks, and you have to be able to run different tasks, different processes on several lines to be able to fill your entire shift, your entire day of work. Because this is just how your assembly or how your packing area or whatever part of your operation works. So in such an assembly, in such an area, you also often have more than one person. If you have 4 people working one day in an area, you need at least 4 trained people, but one of them will have a holiday, so you need 5. And even then, when one is sent out on holiday, another one can get sick, you need 6. So you need, you see already where the +2 sort of comes in. Now, when you go to even larger populations, you will see that, and this depends a little bit on what are the normal working times in your country, but what you see a lot happening in most of at least Western Europe is roughly an 8-hour-ish workday with 1 hour of break. So that means that 1 in every 7 people, well, basically a seventh of the productive time, you also have non-productive time at the bare minimum, and this is without any vacations. So this already means that if you want to produce completely continuously on your lines, you need to add more people. But okay, this you do in production. But the same goes for vacations. They are also roughly 14%, was roughly 1 in 7. Again, it depends on your country, but somewhere between 10 and 20% of the time that you hire a person, they will be absent. So this is vacation and illness rate combined, and maybe on the very high end it's something like 25%, but 10 to 20% of overtraining is needed. Plus, when you know that people go out, you also have to have at least an extra replacement. But that's when you get into the large numbers, take 20%, but never fewer than 2 people more than you need in one shift. If you have multiple shifts, so for instance, if you work in a 3-shift pattern, that means that you basically do the same work 3 times a day, then, and we have 3 people in that shift, we need at least 9 people, otherwise we cannot even staff the shift. But now we are also getting into, do all of these shifts need 2 people extra? Probably not. Because usually what you see is that any of the shifts is allowed to have someone go on vacation. And even there, it's often quite negotiable that only 2 people out of the 3 shifts at the same time take their vacation. This depends a little bit on how you set it up. So if you have 1 person more per shift, usually you get by quite well. So then you have 3, maybe 4 overtrained. So when you need your 9 operators total, that is 12 to 13 that you need to train on this workplace. The other side of this medal doesn't really change. So when you have a lot of people who are working in shifts or with multiple people in the same area, people don't need to be able to do more workplaces. In fact, you can get by training your people for a couple fewer workplaces. So when you have a big staff for one production area with basically one job that you are planned into for a day or for a shift, that means that it's more easy for you to get by with temporary staff or almost unskilled type of labor. So you can focus people on 1, maybe 2 jobs, or even a job within such a department, because you know that with differing volumes and a sort of flexibility all around your organization, you can still manage to put them on the places where they are skilled, and at the same time manage to keep all of the places that you need filled up, because part of this group is more flexible. So the larger your skill base of the larger the group that does one workplace becomes, the less important it becomes to have at least this 3rd workplace. Now, I would always again advise that people know at least 2 workplaces, and preferably 2 workplaces that are not linked directly to each other. So when you have an assembly line where you prepare, manufacture and assemble one very specific product, and this product is not scheduled for production today, none of those work centers will be working. So when a person knows one whole line that is either on or off for the whole day, you are not creating flexibility. You're creating a little bit of flexibility because they can, work in any part, but it would be, of course, better to plan them in jobs that are sort of the same job type, which is usually easier to learn. But also it means that if your product load switches, then probably it switches towards another job that they have also learned. So keep that in mind. But in general, just to get back to the core of this story, there is a rule of thumb when you want to know how much do I have to train my people and how many people do I have to train for my workplaces. Remember that the general rule is 1 person should know 3 jobs, 3 workplaces, and that is a place where you would schedule a person for a full day. And for every workplace that you have, you would like to have at least 3 people who can fully independently work that workplace. When you have a shift pattern, this increases. Now, I hope it got you to think a bit, and also got you to think about putting some limits on, because that's the other side of this story. Don't try to get all your people to know all your places or to train everyone on a specific place. That is overstretching your people. So either they can easily handle it and you're probably putting them at too easy work, so to say, so you're not fully utilizing their capabilities, or, and there's a much higher chance for that, they did learn to work on all of those workplaces, but they haven't been there so long in practice that in the end they forget. So you need this balance of what can you master and what flexibility would you like in your company. And in most manufacturings, 3-to-1 and 1-to-3 is the ideal ratio for that. Now, if you like this explanation and sort of rattling of the mind, don't forget to hit that like button. Let me know in the comments, what parts of Lean, Six Sigma, continuous improvement are you struggling with? Where would you like to have some more explanation, my thoughts on things? I'd be happy to read your comments and questions. For now, I wish you the best of luck training your people, and as always, also make sure that you enjoy your training.